The views and opinions on Where Did the Road Go belong to those making them. Do not mistake allowing freedom of speech for agreement.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? And this week I welcome back Mr. Jeremy Vaeni. Hey there.
Should I pause longly for the applause? Because you're going to insert applause there, right?
I will, of course, insert applause there.
Big crowds, big stadium crowds. Hi, everyone. Hi, Seriah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I've been listening to a bunch of the old Paratopias and occasionally some of the other shows you do, the Our Undoing radio stuff, and I compiled things I want to talk to you about.
Awesome. I happen to be the guy you would probably want to talk to about them. So
yeah,
look how that works out. Yeah.
So I one of the things that you mentioned on your show at some point is that Lisa Ritzmann passed away, Jeff's wife.
Yeah.
I don't remember how long ago that was. It was a while back. Mm-hmm. And you did a really touching episode about that. And I didn't realize you were partially doing the Paratopias for her.
Yeah. Yeah. She had asked me, well, I can't remember. I think I had emailed her and said, you know, we were selling them as an archive. And I just said, what do you want to do about this? And she said, just do whatever you want. I trust you. But then said, you know, I would love to have them all out there so that Jeff's voice, you know, gets heard.
Yeah. And honestly,
I was like, okay, I'm on to that project.
How much do you have left?
I think probably it will end at some point in 2025.
Okay.
Because we just entered
2011.
I think we're in January 2020. Well, we might be in January 2012.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
I'm not
I think
sure.
you are.
Yeah. And we ended it in late 2012. So there's that, but then we go on later to do a handful of episodes called Paratopia Oculus.
Right.
So I will put those out, and then I will put out Jeff's what I have of Paranormal Waypoint.
Okay. That was his first one?
That was his solo show that he had after Paratopia.
Oh, okay.
But I guess he had a falling out with the guy who was producing it, and I think he erased all of Jeff's stuff way back when.
Oh.
So I just have like a handful of episodes. So if there's any like fan out there who has like all of Paranormal Waypoint, please contact me. I'd like to put them out for everyone.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So there's plenty more to come is what you're saying.
Plenty more to come. Yeah, including an unheard episode of Paratopia. Never before released episode of Paratopia.
Really?
With Jeff. So, yeah.
Does this involve Shroud Man?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'll announce it now. I mean, I don't really care about, you know, I was going to announce it at the you know, every year I do a new Halloween special because Halloween was Jeff's favorite holiday. So just sort of a, you know, Jeff remembrance. And yeah. I was going to announce it then. I've been toying with not putting out because basically it is Jeff's answer to when David Biedny went on a show and trashed us. And Jeff wanted to put out there the true story of that, which is probably not at all important, except for the today, you know? Yeah. Except that when you listen back to Paratopia, you hear us talking around Biedny and you hear us talking around the Paracast and all of that stuff. Because a lot of people were like, just focus on your own material. Don't bother with the naysayers. But then a lot of people were like, what really is happening here?
Yeah.
So I just thought, well, since we had taped it and threatened to put it out. And then Jeff said, no, I maybe we shouldn't. And I said, okay, well, when we did the archive, what about the archive? And he said, no, let's just let it go. But I thought, you know, I get it. But then Dave Biedny passed away, oddly enough, which I didn't realize until somebody alerted me to this when I was doing a live stream. And I was going to look him up to see, like, when last I had looked him up, he seemed to be doing really well. Like, I think he was teaching at Yale or something. And I thought, well, I'm not going to put out the Paratopia Zero is what we called it. I'm not going to put that out if Dave's doing well, because I don't want to screw with his career. You know, like he left ufology. This is all in the past. This is purely for the like purist who has to own everything, you know? But he's passed away. Jeff's passed away. Lisa's passed away. It's one more chance to hear Jeff's voice. It's clearing the air about a story that Biedny did get to have his say in life. So it's not as though he has to respond to anything.
Right.
So I may put that out in between the end of Paratopia and before Paratopia Oculus, because I definitely don't want it to be the last thing you think of when you think of Paratopia. Is like
right.
Sort of gripe session. But I think it should be out there for some weird reason. Do you think I'm wrong? Maybe you can talk me off the ledge.
I think you're right. I think you should put it out. Honestly, I just recently listened to the episode where you were dealing with the guy from, what was it? Something Cemetery.
Yeah, Mind Cemetery.
Mind Cemetery, which I can find a total of one episode anywhere online. But man, that you guys were killing me. Like, I was driving, listening to that, and I was laughing so hard. I'm like, oh my God, I can't take this.
Can you believe he called in?
That's part of it. He called in and just like was still trying to gaslight you the whole time.
I know. Yeah. Whatever. I mean, it's hilarious to look back on, like, the fact that they called it Mind Cemetery. where thought goes to die, is like hilarious to me. But it's just funny because, I mean, it's really a warning to anyone who gets into podcasting. It's true what they say that, with podcasting, you get all of the crap, but not a lot of the benefits. I mean, unless you're a Joe Rogan or somebody, or a Seriah, somebody who's going to make a ton of money off this.
Oh, yeah.
Then
Joe Rogan, maybe.
Right. But I mean, you know what I mean? Like, if you're not going to make a ton of money, there's still this sense of fame, which isn't real, but it is in the podcast community where, like, other podcasters may hear what you're doing and may see that you're getting, an audience, and then they think it's in their best interest to make a name off you by trashing you.
Yeah. So
people will start listening to them. So you get that, but then you don't get the perks of actual fame or actual money.
I can say I don't think anyone's ever trashed this show. Like, there have been the occasional YouTube comments and things like that, but never like another podcast.
Yours is a little different though, right? Because you're actually on the radio.
Well, I'm on the radio as as a podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I would think that's maybe in a little more high esteem or something. But you started this show after Paratopia?
Right. And I started at the beginning of 2013.
Huh.
So right after you guys stopped.
Like, the beginnings, I think it was like us, Banal, and maybe the guys in Australia whose names I can't remember, and Paracast, Mysterious Universe, and the Paracast. I think those were like sort of the main hub. I could be wrong. There could be others of podcasts. And I just remember I feel like we took the hits.
Yeah.
Like, we took the hits of that type of like stalking by upstart shows. And also, like, when we did start charging money, we got crapped on because podcasts are supposed to be free, man. How dare you?
Right.
And so, yeah, we took the hits on a lot of that stuff. And then I think, shortly thereafter, it all became like normal, like everyone had a podcast and people were charging money and it was all accepted.
And now it's all done through things like ads and Patreon.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny because listening to these episodes, you guys were already onto the stuff that I thought I was bringing into this field, and I had never heard Paratopia.
Right.
So I feel like there's weird continuation. You guys stopped, and then I started doing something similar, not quite the same, but similar, and right after you guys stopped.
Right.
It also
good.
It also explains why Jeff liked this show so much.
Uh-huh.
Because I hadn't heard of either of you until I heard Jeff's show on Project Archivist.
Oh, okay.
And that was an older one, and I listened to it. Who's this Jeff Ritzmann guy? This guy, I got to talk to this guy. And Rosian's like, yeah, I don't think he does this stuff anymore. And he's like, but I'll give you his info.
Well, good. I'm glad you guys made that connection.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So, as am I. You did say something in the episode with Lisa, and you didn't get into any details, but you said people were looking to profit off of Jeff. And I forget exactly what you said. Like, what kind of stuff was going on?
The problem is, if I say it out loud, they're going to know I'm talking about them, and then they're going to be hurt and depressed. And I don't want to bring that to anybody, even these people, because I don't think people mean it necessarily.
Okay.
But it's like, he was not, he was barely dead before everyone was like, I got a book, I'm writing this book. I gotta you got to help me get this published. You got to, I got to talk to the family, this sort of thing.
Oh.
It was like 3 or 4 people, and it came up again when Lisa died, and I just felt like there were certain people who were like fishing me for, well, how you feeling about this now?
Yeah.
And it's like, A, I'm not the family. It's not up to me. But
Right.
B, leave them alone, man. They just, Cody just lost his mom and dad,
Yeah.
Like what is wrong with you? Why are you so, I can't swear, but why are you so selfish?
And how old is Cody now?
I don't know. I mean, I think he's probably in his late 20s.
Okay, that's what I figured. So there's at least
when
that.
I knew him, he was in high school still. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, in one of those episodes, he was saying something about yelling at him about something, and you were like, well, teenagers.
Yeah, right.
So for people who don't know, Jeff was working on a book, but I don't even think he got close to finishing it.
Well, Jeff worked on a book with someone who he didn't like what they were doing, so he stopped working with them.
Okay.
And then that person now, is like, well, I've got this material. I'm kind of peed off that spent all this time working on this.
Right.
I guess I am just sort of naming names without naming names here.
But most people aren't going to know who that is.
And it's like, you were fired, dude. I mean, this is what I don't understand. It's like, I try to be nice. I try to be as nice as possible without saying it, but it's like, you were fired, and it sucks being a writer, and it sucks being rejected, and it sucks having dedicated all of your time to that. But the fact is, he and Lisa looked at what the person was doing and were like, this just isn't right for us. This isn't telling the story the way Jeff wanted to tell it. So then he started sort of writing it himself, and then probably just got sidetracked or something. But yeah, I mean, I've seen the material. I know what the material is.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be comfortable at all working on that. That's not what he wanted.
Right. But so that shouldn't ever see the light of day. But by you preserving the Paratopias, there's so much of his stuff that's there,
Yeah, who needs a book?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it would be cool to have. It would be cool had he finished it, definitely, because it would be all there in one place. But he does talk about all the stuff, and he came on this show and he talked about a ton of it.
Yeah, and I mean, there could be a project of like, I'm not going to do it, but going through the transcripts and creating a book or something, but someone in his family would have to come to me and say, this is what we want.
Right.
I would never presume to do that. And I'm certainly not going to ask them,
Yeah.
So there's that.
Is his son interested in any of this stuff?
I get the feeling not.
Okay.
But I don't really know. I really don't know him that well in adulthood.
Okay. I've been saving this one for a while because I don't know what you meant by it, because it wasn't the answer I expected you to give. There was an episode where you and Jeff asked each other questions, and that was a brilliant idea. And one of the questions Jeff asked you is, who's the person you like least in the UFO field? And I figured I would have bet money on it being the guy with Emma Woods.
Oh, yeah, Jacobs.
But instead you said Paul Kimball.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I couldn't tell if you were serious or not, because you just said it, and he's like, okay, and you went on.
Well, maybe he meant personally, like of people that I have met and hung out with for a minute.
So
and in hindsight, I'll apologize. Paul Kimball's not the worst person in the world. I think I was overly cruel to him about his vampire movie and all of that. But I was a prick. What are you going to do? But I had my problems with Paul Kimball on a couple of levels, and we'll just leave it at that because
okay, all right. So it wasn't anything too serious.
I don't think so. No, I think it was just like I found him pompous, and we both thought that he was just sort of stealing our material.
Oh, I see.
Because literally we do a Paratopia, and like within a week or two, he would do a blog post as if he had this thought all on his own.
Gotcha.
And then you watch people go, Paul, that's brilliant. You're amazing. And every time Jeff and I would just turn to each other like, are you joking? But of course, I have no proof that happened.
Right. Right.
But I do have pretty good evidence he's pompous. But maybe he's changed. I don't know. We all change.
I will say he helped me a lot when I started this show. He was one of the regular people I had on. And he tended to be very, very skeptical, almost to a fault. And I remember one show where I said something like, for someone who's had his own experiences, you're pretty skeptical about this stuff. And he paused and went, right, you read my book.
He's had experiences?
Yes.
Well, the other thing, if I remember correctly, and I'm sorry, Paul, because honestly, this is all water under the bridge, but Seriah is asking me. Remember when he was on Paracast, he was sticking up for hypnosis and I think Jacobs and Hopkins. And it was when like the tide turned with public opinion that suddenly he was like, oh, you know what? This is bad. Emma's a victim here. And it just seemed like, oh, convenient. Like he wants to be on the right side of history. So, but could that just be that I was already soured on him by that point and looking for things? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
I will say he's the one that got me off of the hypnosis thing. One of the shows we did, he started talking about hypnosis was not a memory recovery tool, which, I mean, obviously I've now heard you guys say way before that, just after I heard Paul say it. Because up to that point, I didn't realize there was a problem with hypnosis.
Right.
And then, he gave me all this information.
So, it's good. Even if he's parroting, it's good to be parroted, I suppose.
But with you, I can never totally tell if it's serious or not.
Yeah, because my delivery is always sarcastic, right?
Right, exactly. So I was like, wait, does he really not like Paul Kimball more than, man, I literally blank on his name.
David Jacobs.
Thank you.
I literally do not like, no, David Jacobs. I mean, Paul Kimball, I'd hung out with once in person at a UFO event, and I think just the once, and, was friendly with for a while online. And that's different than Jacobs, who is just a monster.
Right, right. So some of the other things here I have on this list. Now, was Kimball part of Project Core?
No.
Okay.
No, there was a guy named Kimball Cooper.
Okay, that's why, because I thought I heard Kimball, and I went, wait, was Paul Kimball part of this too? So do you feel like you got anything out of Project Core?
At the time, for sure.
Now this was an anonymous survey of experiencers.
Yeah. And unfortunately, although it is a small pool of people, to my knowledge, and it may have changed since then, but not with like the free survey or any of the, the Marden survey, like these are not scientifically valid. So as far as I know, ours is the only one that passes that sniff test. But again, it's a small sample of people, so take it with a grain of salt that you can find as much there as you would like. But even so, yeah, I got something out of it at the time. Now I just I don't care as much. I mean, at some point I had to wake up and realize, like, I'm an experiencer of not just the so-called alien stuff, but also of the so-called spirit stuff and Kundalini and all that, which is a 24/7 affair. And it's like, it's funny how you can get so lost in your own head trying to be rational and trying to do the science or trying to be skeptical, and all of that you forget, like, oh, right, there's a reality here and it's still me. So maybe I should concentrate more on me. Because at the end of the day, I feel like my own life, for me at least, is enough to data mine,
right,
and riff off of that. I don't need to even bother. There are people whose encounters I believe, but I could be wrong. They could end up being frauds or delusional or something. You just never know. Right. So I got to just stick with me, and that's kind of where I am now, I guess. But then it was great to look at other people. It was great to even see, and you will see this actually in probably all of the surveys, because even though this was the scientifically valid one, there's overlap for sure. And I think one of the overlaps is that, as you know, creative people tend to have this in their lives, to have sort of lifelong or, experiences. And
trauma is another one.
What's that?
Trauma is another common factor.
Trauma is a factor. Well, and trauma and creativity might also be a factor. And to me, like, these are things to really look at just in terms of, I think it gets to George Hansen, honestly, the trickster theory. But I think in that, if you want to get this out of your life, you develop a routine. And people who have routines, therefore, normal 9-to-5 lives and concentrate on normal things, can block it out.
Yeah.
And do successfully block it out. And I think, like, trauma takes away at an early age or whenever it happens, but usually I tend to think of like early trauma, childhood trauma or something, but it doesn't have to be that. But whenever it happens, it takes away your sense of normalcy, your sense of authority, of being protected and all of that. And I think that's when the blinders come off and, greater reality may come pouring in. And then I think the natural reaction to that is generally to be scared.
Yes.
And then when you're scared, you tend to think that, well, there must be someone scaring me on purpose. And then you read the literature and it will be filled with horror. So it's important to step back from all that and go, what's really going on here? Well, really, what is it with the trauma? What is it with like isn't it like it's doing away with societal norms? So we don't have a society that is prepared for the paranormal, except to poo-poo it and say, oh, that's bad, don't believe in that, it's the devil or something.
Right, right.
But if you look at any nature culture, however, natural cultures that are not born of books, Bibles and the such, do have a way to incorporate this into their lives, and it probably wouldn't be as much of a shock.
Yeah.
So I think somewhere in there is the important thing to look at, and we tend not to, because even with trickster theory, we want to be like, oh, it's a trickster? Okay, who's this trickster entity? The devil? You know what I mean?
Right. That's yeah. But they do, like, indigenous cultures do have more of a paradigm to adopt this stuff and to work with this stuff and not treat it like the other, like a scary monster. And I think when you put that emotional energy out there too, it kind of just replicates back at you what you're giving it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, so this gets to something that I've been working on recently, and it seems more and more true, which is that there are two things going on, at least. One is the bulk of paranormal, alien, whatever stuff is coming out of the stream of human consciousness.
Yeah.
And then there is an actual intelligence, not of that consciousness, that may be speaking with us. And so it gets confusing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it has go ahead.
I
was going to say, and it has to speak to us through that stream.
Yes. It has to speak to us through that stream, put on a mask and talk. And the only way you can really tell the difference is the message of that will be wake up.
Yeah.
And the message of the other thing will be go down another rabbit hole. Go on a hero's journey. Further yourself. Learn. And that's how you strengthen yourself, because you are of that human consciousness stream. So it's self-empowerment versus death of self.
Right. That's an interesting way to look at it. I mean, because self-empowerment can lead to that death of self eventually. I mean,
no.
You don't think so?
Well, only in the sense of you need the healthiest self you can,
right,
to understand what the death of self is. Like, if you can't hear it, if you're totally screwed up, then you're not going to be able to hear it. The problem is if you go on an empowerment trip, odds are you're still not going to want to hear it, because you're into like gaining powers, learning new things, feeling like you're getting somewhere, feeling like things are happening, feeling like you're in sync with the universe and all of that.
Right.
And that's all the Matrix, man.
I guess I was thinking more of it as that type of stuff helping you with self-awareness.
Sure. I mean, but I guess what I'm saying is that there are two things. Yeah, self-awareness, but then it's like this. If there's something that is not coming in from the universe, that it's essentially timeless, then we have to be timelessness to meet timelessness. And the self is a thought construct, is psychological time. So the self wants to remain in existence, and the universe will accommodate that, because you are the universe, right? So you're always going to be dangling a carrot before you. You are the carrot, you are the horse, and you are the string, but they all look like different things to keep you here. And so even if you have a moment of like timelessness, let's say, and you come back, the universe tends to like wrap itself around that and create a carnival. It sort of pads out its interiority with our experiences, with our novel experiences. And that's kind of how the universe grows, and that's how we grow within it. And then we tell stories about it, and we swear that that's the truth, and that's spirit and all that in it, but it's actually a simulation. And so I think that if there are people watching this, watching our sense of time as all at once, in a pulled back perspective, if they're not in our time and they're watching us, however long we go on, whether it's multiple lives or just the one life, whatever it is, they may be picking and choosing like, okay, let's insert ourselves here, right? We're going to insert ourselves here. We're going to hope that this person sees through the facade, that they're going to immediately weave around us with all these constructs of knowledge of, oh, this is archetypes, this is gods, this is spirits, this is aliens. We've got all this stuff ready to go to define it. Are they going to define it? Or is the dumb human going to define it? Or are they going to see through it? We're going to give you some clues. The experience isn't going to be a perfect narrative. There's going to be something in there that's embarrassing, something in there that calls attention to the nonsense going on of what you think is the sort of the surface story. It's all going to be baked in. And what you decide to repress, if you decide to repress any of it, which we normally do,
right.
That's going to dictate whether you have a real successful communication here or not, or if it becomes part of your illusion. Does that make sense, or do I need to explain that more?
I mean, you can if you want. It makes sense to me.
Okay. Well, you're all I care about. Screw these people.
I mean, you did elucidate that fairly well, and it's not something that's easy to explain. But do you think oneness is the end result?
Well, oneness is always the case. But the thing is, we like to rely on that and just go, well, everything's one in the end, right? So therefore, we've already hit the finish line.
Right.
But that oneness, nothingness, which is consciousness being all things, well, all of that is us, right? So it's not just the oneness. The thing, if you were to put it on a timeline, the thing that's happening first is there's nothing. And then that nothing is one energy. And then that one energy is all things. So from the timeline, actually, perspective, and you can put that in science terms and say the Big Bang, the all things part is what comes later. It's what the oneness is doing, right?
Yeah,
is being all of this. What the singularity is doing is being multiplicity. So it's not fair to just say we're one. We are, but we're also all of that it entails. All of that. Yeah, we're the fish tank, but we're all the crap in the fish tank too. So let's not forget that. All
the diversity that is there as well.
Yeah, and so we have to function that way. If we're here in time, we've got to function in time. It does no good to just note that theoretically everything is energy, and then you whack your head against the wall and it hurts because both things are true. There's still the wall.
So what do you think we exist here for? Like, why exist at all? Why not just be in that oneness?
Well, that's the thing. You can't be. You are in that one. You are the oneness.
True. Okay. Yes, that's fair.
So I think from the point of view of nothingness being sentient, and that sentience just being, and what is it being? It's being difference. Therefore, it's being multiple. One, you can't just nothing can't be more nothing.
Fair.
So it's expressing as all things. One of these things is you. So I think you are inevitable. And is there meaning in that? Is there a reason for that? I don't think so. I think it just is. And I think when we keep trying to find meaning in life, in this, I think this is the sort of tricky part, is like the finding meaning, the subjective meaning. It's meaningful to me. All of that stuff you can do. You can believe that and you can go about life that way. But then there is the quote unquote deeper thing of when that self is no more, then the oneness becomes the case of the body. The self-awareness of that original, nothingness being becomes the self-awareness of the body in lieu of you. So if I were to say that humans had a meaning or a reason to be, I would say we need to get there. Like, I guess I would put it in terms of what does it actually mean to be a human being? What is the full expression of a human being? Is it just this partiality thing, stumbling through life and making excuses for its repetitive screw-ups generation after generation, or is there something that we need to see to break out of that mind altogether? And once that mind is broken, the scary sort of supposition is like there could be a horror movie aspect of like possession or something, but it's not. It's truth. It's that original consciousness, that the so-called your true face. Coming through the body, the self-aware aspect of that, because it's already the case unconsciously, we're all one. But consciously, you can be that, well, not you can be, the body can be alive with the sentience and the self-awareness of that oneness. And is that what we all need to do, as opposed to relegating it to like Buddha and just saying, well, that guy did it, I can't.
Right. Okay, I did have other Project Core questions.
Okay, I'm sorry. I rambled about important things. Go on.
Yeah, that's... Well, it was interconnected to the Project Core thing, but what you said what made yours more scientific than some of these other ones?
I don't remember. Thankfully, I don't have to because I'm not the scientist of the group. So there was Dr. Kimball Cooper and Elaine Tarr and Tyler Kochjohn, and they know and knew how to do the math and the data and construct the questions in such a way that it would pass, it would pass scientific muster. It would, so I leave that in their capable hands.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And what at the time did you take from it?
Also, I guess I should just say in that there was no leading anyone down a path. That was part of it.
Yeah.
So what did I take from it? Oh God. I mean, I wrote a summary of what I found back then. I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Yeah, because that was what, 2012 the results came out?
I think it was later. I think it was 2015 maybe even.
Oh, was that far out? Okay.
Yeah. It may have been not 2015, but I don't think it was was it 2012?
Well, you started it in, I think, 2011.
You could be right.
So
yeah, I'm just trying to remember, did we release it I guess we did release it when we were still doing Paratopia.
It sounded like that was the case. You haven't gotten to those episodes yet, but it sounded like that was something that was upcoming.
See, I don't even remember that. You want me to remember what my conclusion was?
Well, it was a while ago. I mean, if you don't remember, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's perfectly okay.
But it's online if anyone wants to read it. If you go to ourundoing.com, there are probably other places you can read it, but it's there. Or paratopia.net. They both bring you to the same place. And Project Core is up there. You can read mine and Jeff's conclusions. And I think I put Ellen Tarr's. I didn't realize she did a conclusion. I don't think she did it at the time. I think she did a separate thing later.
Oh.
And then I think I've included that now. But Tyler Kochjon did not, because I think he sort of left it all in the main paper.
Okay.
And just said, that's good enough for me.
All right. Do you think it was worth doing?
I think so. I think even if it was just for our own benefit, selfishly, I think it was worth doing. I mean, I think it's worth doing to at least have a template out there. Because once you say, this is the only scientifically valid, survey, the main reaction to that is, what about this? What about this? You're just being arrogant. And it's okay, well, you don't know what you're talking about, but fine. But there's going to be one or two people who are going to know what they're talking about and look at it and go, oh, okay. And then hopefully they'll, if they care to do one themselves, a bigger one, they can take the format and run with it,
Yeah, that's true. One of the things that the Mind Cemetery guy was getting on you about was the whole Phil Imbrogno thing.
Yeah.
And am I remembering right that you didn't fully come out and expose him until after he had passed away and it wasn't going to hurt him?
No, I don't. I think he's still alive.
Oh, is he?
He just passed away to ufology.
Oh, okay.
Maybe he's dead by now. I don't know. No, my problem was, so Phil Imbrogno is someone I was friendly with, and he would bring me and groups of people around to these monuments or whatever in upstate New York and do these tours for free of this stuff and all of that. And so I was friendly enough with him that when I guess some people at the Paracast had found out that he was lying about his non-existent military record and about studying at MIT, neither of which were true. But what he was telling me in private was that they were wrong. And I don't remember, but it was basically the equivalent of saying, look, I'm taking these online courses at this subset school of MIT, and I'm thinking about suing them for saying this stuff for defamation. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to interfere in that. If that's what's going to happen, let's let it play out. Mm-hmm. That was my thinking, is that they might be wrong about what they're saying, or else why would he be threatening to sue? But it turns out they were right. Phil was lying. But my thinking was let's find that out, because part of the problem was the Paracast people were upset about the Emma Woods stuff. And so they were looking for their thing to be aha, look, we're relevant too. we can do sleuthing. So part of it to me was just that, was we know about the bad blood between the two shows. We know that what their sort of mentality is. And here's Phil saying he's going to sue them. All right, let's wait for it. Well, it turns out Phil was lying. And at that point, when it was clear that he was lying to me, then I, outed all of this.
Okay.
But I was willing to take the hits from people, if people were, because I get it. I get hitting on me for that in some sense. But in another sense, but wait, don't you need more people to figure out? We need more than just what was being put out there as conclusively, he's guilty.
And wasn't there some weird thing, there were two guys with the same name who put out similar info, but they weren't the same person?
Yes, I forgot about that, but that was part of, I can't remember, it was a Jeff something or other. Yeah, and so I thought that they were right. Yes, there was somebody who like hated Phil, and then somebody who had the same name and was legit looking into his background.
Right.
And I spoke to that guy and then realized, or he told me, I'm not the other guy, you know? And it was like, okay, part of this is that screw up too.
And that's such a weird thing. You get two people who come up with the same info with the same name and they don't even know about each other.
Right.
One of those universe games.
It's the trickster, damn it.
Yeah. It's the name game. So he's out of and the thing is, why do these people, do they think that lying about their academic records and stuff will make them seem more legit? Is that, you think, the reasoning there?
Yes. And I think, the other part to Phil Imbrogno for me is I did think he was lying, but I didn't think it was about that. I thought he was lying about, like, his latest book at that point was this book about the djinn that he had written with Mary Ellen Guiley. And where he claimed, and he, said this to us when we were out, in New York together, and he was on the tour, told us about going to Saudi Arabia, being at dinner with the Saudi royals, and going to this, rappelling or whatever that's called, down into a cave and, encountering the djinn and all this sort of stuff. And I thought he was lying, but I thought he was lying because I thought he was a military guy, and I thought he was probably there doing like CIA stuff, and like this was all a cover for it. Like, that's how my stupid mind works. So it's like I intuited correctly that he was lying, just not. I just thought it was cover story for this other preposterous thing that I had in my head that he could be doing. And so, yeah, wait, what was the question? Because now I've lost the thread.
That's a good question. What was the question? Why some of these people want to like pretend to be academics when they're not?
Oh, like, yeah. So in talking to him, it's really clear because he would talk about that. He found it upsetting that he had been doing this for so many years and he wasn't getting anywhere. Like, no one was really taking him seriously. He wasn't like a main stage player. And yet he's been in ufology for years. He's worked with Hynek. He's worked with Vallee. So I think there's that thing that happens. And I think it probably happens to people who work in, he's not a professor. I think he worked for like a grade school or high school or something. But it's the same thing with Jacobs. It's the same thing. You can go down the list of people where they get bored with what they're doing. They get fed up with not getting the recognition they think they deserve. And then they go off the deep end. And I think that's what it is. I think he wrote a fantasy story in the djinn thing because he just was like, screw it. If you guys want to believe like the Greers of the world and the con men, then I'll be the con man. But that could be another cockamamie idea of mine too, because I don't know when he started saying he worked at MIT or had a military background. Like, did he say that to Jacques Vallee and Alan Hynek back when? Did they think he was a somebody? Like, when did he start lying about that? I don't know. But I definitely know that was on his mind because he said it repeatedly.
And that was what you were waiting for. He was about to retire, and you didn't.
He was about to retire, and I thought, like, a lot of people have said to me, like, well, he doesn't deserve his retirement because people were saying we need to call his school. His school needs to know about this. They need to fire him. And I was thinking, like, no, because he's an old man and he's got a wife. He may have kids. I don't know. But I get it. He wrote books and you bought them and he was lying and you're reading a charlatan's work. I get it. But there's also a little part of me that's like a human. And it's like, he could have family depending on this retirement money who don't know about any of this, who don't care about any of this.
Yeah.
And it's not right to do to me, it's just not, it's not worth it. It's not the outrageous craptasticness that is like a Greer, where where people are money. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, to me, I can just see the broken human being in Phil Imbrogno as opposed to the pathology. And so I took pity on that too, sue me.
Actually, it was very respectable. I very much liked that you did that because it didn't hurt anyone. And it didn't hurt.
Most of the books you're reading are lies, FYI. So just remember, it's like, wait, he lied? Well, let me go back to David Icke. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
When you say most of the books you're reading, are you talking about from researchers or from experiencers?
I don't know how to parse that out. I mean, probably a little of one, a little of two.
Okay.
Well, I mean, sure. I mean, if you're going to include like hypnosis stuff, there are experiencers that have written books that are writing. I mean, it's not their fault that they got hypnosis and think that they're part of a science fiction story.
Right.
But nevertheless, what they're writing is likely false.
Yes.
So,
as opposed to someone who's intentionally knows they're lying and is making stuff up.
Yeah. Or just delusional people, like, I mean, Bill Cooper, right?
Right.
I mean, he's got one of the most popular books to date, Behold a Pale Horse. Isn't that what it is?
Yep.
And, he was like a schizophrenic who ended up in a shootout with cops. So what are you going to do? Like you buy stuff, believe it at your own risk. That's why, like, even with the spirit stuff with me, because this even came up today with a friend who was like, I believe you, but I don't know why I believe you. And it's like, the good thing about the spirit stuff, the death of self stuff, is like, don't believe me. You shouldn't, but do it yourself. Like, if you care at all about your own life, figure this out, sit with yourself, figure yourself out. It's a little bit harder with the paranormal stuff and the UFO stuff.
Yeah.
To do that. But nevertheless, I mean, I don't know. I would just say, like, if you're someone who's getting fooled a lot by the Greers of the world and whoever, there may be some people like a Phil Imbrogno who may be a little trickier to detect. But if it's like obvious stuff, if it's Lou Elizondo, right?
Right.
If Lou Elizondo, if the fact about Lou Elizondo is we don't really know what he did in any given organization, and yet he's got a book to tell you all about it, then if you're the kind of person who's like, I've got to read that day one, maybe sit with yourself and ask yourself if you're prone to being lied to. If maybe something like that speaks to your own wish fulfillment as opposed to anything the government might know.
Yeah,
that's all.
So why do you think Whitley was okay with the Lou Elizondo book? Because he seemed to be promoting it for a bit there. Well,
I mean, how do I approach Whitley? Do I be delicate? Listen, there's two things. One is Whitley has a show to do.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Whitley has a weekly show. And I don't know if anyone's noticed, but in his newsletter, every single guest he's ever had ever is the most amazing, compelling, important person doing the work you've ever seen in your entire life. So this is just old school advertisement. And I know Whitley has told me, like, his position is, who am I to say that someone is being truthful or not? I can't really tell that. So I'm going to put them on unless I really think they're egregious. Like, he's never had Greer on because he really, knows that Greer is full of crap.
Okay.
He doesn't necessarily know Lou Elizondo is full of crap, and so he's going to give him the benefit of the doubt in a way that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
That's one way to approach Whitley, I guess. The other way would be to say, as I would with Jacques Vallee also, we thank you for your service, but you're a bit old now, and you don't know what you're talking about anymore, and it's time to give up the reins. But that would be a little bit harsher. I probably shouldn't say that out loud.
I do wonder if there are ulterior motives to Vallee's last book. People have pointed out
don't know.
that they pushed the date back of stuff they were releasing because of the book, and that might have been the whole reason that he put it. Like, he didn't so much care about the book itself, but maybe getting access to some of those records further back in time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, the problem number one is Paula Harris is the co-author.
Yeah.
And Paula Harris is a known pusher of crap like the Billy Meyer hoax. So I don't know what Jacques Vallee is doing in the same room with Paula Harris, let alone writing a book with her. And then you can get into the fact that, these witnesses are crap, and that the whole story is crap, and that in his very first interview prior to releasing the book, or just on the cusp of releasing the book, he admits that, like, the thing from within the UFO that they took was actually, like, you could get on eBay. It wasn't an alien artifact. It was like a piece of a windmill or something.
Yeah.
And they claimed it was, something they ripped off the wall of this UFO. And it's like, okay, Jacques, what are we doing here, buddy? What are we doing? And it's not just that with Jacques. It's also the work with the so-called metametals. How many Coke cans do you need to look at under an electron microscope to realize, these ain't alien? But it's like, is this the way that people like him and Gary Nolan can, like, be relevant or remain relevant and do the speaking tour and get the gigs and all that? I mean, I don't know. But I just know that to anyone with common sense, the fact is you've come up with nothing, and you're still going around and pretending that this could lead to something, and it never does. and it hasn't, and you know better. I mean, that's the thing that really bothers me. I don't know much about Gary Nolan the way, like, I haven't followed him the way I followed Jacques Vallee all my life.
Same here.
And I know that Jacques knows better. So why doesn't he know better?
The thing about the meta metals, if I'm not mistaken, is that it's not that they're things that couldn't be found on Earth, but they're arranged molecularly in such a way that no one would want to arrange them like this. Like, there's no use for them. They would have.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
But then that's what they say.
True.
But then you give it to like a normal person who knows what they're looking at, and they're just like, yeah, that happens sometimes. You know what I mean? Like.
Okay. Let's talk about one of the weird things that happened to you that I didn't know about until listening to this podcast, which was your Ouija board experience. That was like 2 weeks ago this happened to you, right?
It was 2 weeks ago that you listened to the podcast, probably.
No, it was further back than that.
It was like a sophomore or junior year of high school, probably.
I was surprised to see Ouija boards come up, honestly. I didn't think that would be something you would ever be into. But age-wise, that makes sense.
Right. So, there's a lot of things I shouldn't be into. Pro wrestling, Ouija boards, Michael Jackson. Those are the top three.
Did I not know you were into pro wrestling?
Probably didn't.
Oh, man.
I don't know.
Huh. Have we never talked about it?
It's been a weird life, man.
We're not going to get into a pro wrestling conversation on the air.
Okay.
We'll wait till after.
Maybe that's where you have me and Paul Kimball on, and then we do a makeup thing.
So the Ouija board thing, you want to kind of give people the outline of what happened to you?
I guess. Like, it was a group of friends. I had a Parker Brothers Ouija board and a group of friends who were into it. And we just started playing around with it. And there was someone in the group who is allegedly a psychic. Her mom is a psychic, passed down from generation to generation. And so this thing would really work, especially with her on there. And we ended up just sort of in this narrative with a couple of different alleged entities, one named Acre and one named, after that, Damon. And it ended up being sort of a soap opera with some sideshow soap opera stuff about other friends and their lives. And people who were dead who wanted to come back and tell them something, this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it became this sort of obsessive thing where, after school, we would come over to my house or go over to our other friend's house and play with this and jot it all down in a notebook and try to figure out, like they would give, like, for instance, I lived next to a church, and at one point the church bells went off and the entity or whatever said, French bells from a church, which none of us would know. But it turns out I inquired with the priest, and in fact, they were French bells. So things like that were like tantalizing, But one fine day, I decided to do the thing you're never supposed to do, which is play with a Ouija board alone in my living room. And it wouldn't really move, but it did feel as though there was heat coming off the Ouija board. And I had these amplified, like, RCA speakers or whatever the Radio Shack brand was, speakers that started going all staticky and weird, which in truth, I got new speakers and they did it too. So it could have been a coincidence that this just happened the first time as I'm playing with this Ouija board. And I felt like there might be voices coming from it, and it was like scary. And so I was like, okay, I got to get this thing off the board. So I called our psychic friend, she lived with her older sister. And they said, come on over, I'll get it off the board. Then I didn't have a car, so I called my friend Travis, and I got this, all I can say is like an answering machine from hell. It was like a multitonal, from The Exorcist, multitonal voice saying something like, "We're not here," with a harp playing in the background. And so I literally threw the phone down and ran out onto the porch and was like hyperventilating. And I'm like, I got to go back in there. I got to call someone else with a car. This is a nightmare. So I did that, and a friend came and picked me up and brought me there. And there were a number of friends there. And so the sister, actually her husband, who wanted nothing to do with any of this, the sister was like sort of would facilitate with us because she wanted to keep us safe, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. She wasn't really the psychic in the family, but but she knew about all this stuff because their mom really was like, or at least, thought she was. I don't, if she was or not, but she did claim to be. And so I'm sure she grew up with all of this kind of crap, right?
Yeah.
So, but her husband, who wanted nothing to do with any of this, had written her a letter that morning saying, hey, can you stop with the Ouija board? Because the cats are going nuts and something else. I can't remember what the other thing is, but there was like two things that he attributed to this. So, okay, so here I come with like the devil on the board or whatever. We all, put our hands on the oracle and she facilitates and this thing comes on and claims to be Satan. And it's like, it's going really fast. It's like going around the board really fast and, swearing and saying, you're all going to die. You're going to go to hell, all this sort of stuff. And now that I'm in my element, right. Now that I've got my, the confidence of others, it's like internet balls, but like Ouija board balls about me. I'm like back to my skeptical self. So I'm like, yeah, right. If you're the devil, prove it. And immediately as I say that, the answering machine in the living room starts clicking. The radio in our friend's bedroom turns on and a candle holder splits in two right before us. And so I look at my friend Paul, who's a punk rocker, and we both start crying. And so our friend's sister here calls their dead Uncle Bobby to the board and says, Uncle Bobby, can you get rid of this entity, whatever it is? Supposedly he gets rid of the entity. The heat level goes down on the board. And she says, Uncle Bobby, since the radio's on, can you turn it on to a station? Because the radio in the next room was just static. And through the static comes the Beatles' Good Day Sunshine.
Wow.
And I went in there to turn it off. Now, I'd spoken to, I don't remember if this was in that episode, but I actually had my friend Tracy, who was in that episode, on again to talk about this, I think on Dreamland.
Oh, okay.
And she remembered, see, I have two memories. I have a memory of the radio being unplugged,
right,
and I have a memory of the radio not being unplugged. She has a memory of me saying the radio was unplugged.
Yeah.
And that may be true, and it may just be that it's so bizarre that I have covered it over with, no, that can't be true. But I don't know. I leave that to you. So it may or may not have been unplugged. But either way, all of that I have described just now happened, and there were multiple people witness to that. So I find it interesting when someone's like, the Ouija board's just, you're all unconsciously moving it with micro impulses to your fingertips. It's like everything else in the paranormal, maybe 98, 99% of the time that's true. But then there's that 1% where something really weird happens.
Well, we got to take a break. I have some questions to ask you about that when we get back. Quick mid-show break and a recommendation. First of all, October 5th, if you're hearing this before October 5th, 2024, is Albatwitch Day down in Columbia, Pennsylvania. Tim Renner will be there. I plan on being there. Chris Ernst should be there. And who knows who else? I think Octavian should be there since he's from that area as well. And Chad from Strange Familiars, I'm sure, will be there. Come out, find me. Should have some kind of stuff with me, DVDs of the documentary or Blu-rays of the documentary or maybe some other stuff that I was thinking about bringing with me or putting together and bringing with me since I still don't have a book for you people. But anyway, come find me. I'll probably be there in the last half of it since it's a bit of a drive. All right. Contact info, everything's at wheredidtheroadgo.com. There may be a point. I started doing this and then realized they can be a little problematic. I want to put all the shows as well as being on the website. I want to put them on Acast so that if someone's listening to it through Acast, they will be able to access every episode right back to the first one. The problem is when I put them on Acast, even if I put the publishing date back to 2013, as I did with the first 3 episodes, it shows up at least on Podcast Addict as new shows, which could be a little confusing to people. So at some point, I might just do all of 2013 as drafts on one day, activate them all. You'll get a flood of shows, like 50 shows from that year, 50 plus shows from that year. And then like a day or two later, I'll put a new show up. So I'll talk about it more as I get closer to actually doing that because it takes me a while to do each one. And there's well over like 600, 700 shows. And if you count the Patreon content, is like over 1,200 shows. So there's a lot of stuff. And I just want to get it all cleaned up and neatened up and in 2 places as a backup, both on the website and on Acast. And it's just going to take a little bit of time, and it's going to hit you with a whole dump of shows all at once. But we'll get to that when we get closer to me actually doing a year of it, I'll kind of give people a warning. But yeah, wheredidtheroadgo.com. Everything's there. All the contact info, all the links to all our social media, and all the shows all the way back to the beginning. As for a recommendation, I'm going with a movie that it only has like a 4.5 on IMDb. That kind of disappoints me. I really, really liked a 4.9. I'm sorry, so almost a 5. And it's I didn't realize it was out on Blu-ray, so now I got to get the Blu-ray of this. The Attic Expeditions. This is a very indie movie. Jeremy cast and directed it. And it has Seth Green in it. It has Jeffrey Combs in it, Ted Raimi, Alice Cooper. It is a weird, weird movie. And to the description, it's under comedy, horror, mystery, thriller. That's pretty accurate, actually. An amnesiac wakes up in an asylum for the criminally insane and must find answers as those around him die one by one. Honestly, this is like one of my all-time favorites. It's such a weird, quirky movie. I like the indie feel. Initially came out in 2001, and I don't think most people have ever heard of it. The tagline says the energy of Evil Dead with much higher production value. I mean, that's not wrong. I mean, I wouldn't say the production value is that much higher, but a little bit. Anyway, that's my recommendation. Check out the Attic Expeditions if you have not already, and you like weird indie films, because it's definitely Lovecraftian, it's definitely weird, and it's fun. All right, back to the show.
Want to continue spooky season after the 31st? Would you like to dive deeper into the world of the paranormal, the occult, cryptozoology, and other unexplainable topics? Then the Strange Realities Conference is the right one for you. Live and online in Nashville, Tennessee, November 1st and 2nd at SIR Nashville, and November 3rd online only. Strange Realities Conference 2024 will feature presentations by Tim Banal, Nathan Isaac, Kendall Lackey, Brent Rains, Micah Hanks, Ren Collier, Joshua Cutchin, Recluse, Nevaeh Terry, and Steve Berg as your Master of Ceremonies. Online with presentations by Seriah Ascath, Timothy Renner, Katie Andrews, Robert Guffey, Greg Bishop, and Becky Ann Galentine. Tickets are $70 in person the whole weekend, or $30 online, and are available at strangerealitiesconference.com. Don't miss this amazing opportunity to learn from some of the best spooktacular minds in the field of the paranormal.
So I'm here with Jeremy Vaeni, and we're talking about his very weird Ouija board experience. The heat coming off the board. I've heard people talk about cold coming off the board as well. I wasn't sure what to make of that. And then when I heard your episode and it's like, oh, heat coming off the board, I'm like, all right, maybe this is a thing. I don't know. I've never actually used a Ouija board, but like looking back on that, what do you think from your vantage point now? What do you think was going on?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to say, because the other part of this was, and we talked about this, I don't know if we said this in the Paratopia episode, but we certainly couldn't remember it when we were doing the Dreamland episode. But there was like a week where we were all going to be tested. And I can't remember. Did we say in the Paratopia episode what we were being tested about? Like what that was about?
I don't think you knew. I think that was the thing. It was just like, you're all going to be tested.
Yeah. So I don't know why. I don't remember what that is. But for some reason, we were all going to be tested. And so we all had a bunch of weird stuff happen to us. And, I woke up with my closet door open, my bed shaking, this sort of thing. Another friend had a coffee cup that sort of flew at him. But for me, the big one was, this is when I was 15 and something for the first time walked into my room. I've described this as a quote unquote alien abduction experience where something walks into my room and it's a shadow, and it's got something long and sharp in its left hand, and it's babbling at me, and I can see its head bobbing as it's babbling at me. And I'm scared to death, and I pull the covers over my head. I say, "Mom, what are you doing? Go back to sleep." And I immediately think, this isn't your mother. You know what this is. And what I knew what that was a so-called alien abduction. What I did not think of that as was anything to do with this crazy Ouija board thing. And it really wasn't until I was talking to Jeff many, many moons later where he was like, yeah, of course. But to me, that was the embarrassing thing. was like, these both can't be happening to a person. You know what I mean? Like back then, especially, like now it's sort of a little more common to say like a bunch of stuff happens to experiencers. But back then it's like, you can't have more than one thing happening or your narrative is blown.
Yep.
And in my mind, that was true. So I ignored the Ouija board stuff, but now I see it all as a part, all of a piece. And so, I mean, whatever that is, it ain't aliens. I don't think it's the devil. I don't think there's an Uncle Bobby, but I don't think it's us. So I don't know what to make of it other than, it may be the sort of trickster element there may be of having this, this alien abduction thing happen during that week. A wake-up call that I probably couldn't get at the age 15, but would see later in life, as like the preposterousness of this. Like not just preposterous in the way that normies say it's got to be all in your head, but the preposterousness of like, no, I know that this is real, but I don't know what's real about it actually.
Right.
I just know that it ain't me. You know what I mean? And so now I've got to contend with that. And so now mystery becomes a mystery again. The unknowable is not known. It is neither demon nor alien. I've just got to wrestle with that later in life. And I do wonder if, again, that's something from outside the universe, outside of time, pressing a finger in at that moment, specifically to do that. In the same way that when I had my, the really vivid sort of, it's not just a shadow now I'm seeing beings. Alien abduction, it happened, the night after I lost my virginity. After this whole buildup of, what does it mean to, I think we've talked about this on your show maybe twice even. But is that somebody doing that on purpose then to call attention again? Like, this is real, but the thing that you want it to be is not what it is. And you need to see that. And I'm fortunate enough to want to look at that. And I think a lot of people would just stick with, this is aliens.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And the multiple things happening to experiencers, as we now know, is more likely than not likely. It's just that people wouldn't talk about all the things happening to them because they didn't want to be dismissed.
Yeah. And sometimes you hear that on like whatever the History Channel MUFON documentary shows are, right? Like every now and then you'll hear the person say like, the thing I didn't want to tell the investigators, that now is the real story, right? And it's just more to the UFO sighting, but they thought that they should self-edit so they don't sound quote unquote crazy because what they're saying is crazy enough to society.
Right, exactly.
And that's what we do,
And instead of looking at it as there's a type of person who is more, has these experiences more accessible to them, we're looking at it as that's a UFO from another planet, or that's a undiscovered ape in the woods, or that's your dead Uncle Larry. We're separating them out. So the likelihood of seeing a Bigfoot and also a UFO is really astronomical if you're looking at them as completely different things. But if you're accepting that they're different faces of the same thing, that's not so weird.
Yeah. And, Jeff and I have talked about this too forever and ever on Paratopia. The phenomenon, once you think you know what it is, there is this element of, are you sure?
Yeah.
And then it will show you something. And, that's best exemplified probably by Terence McKenna seeing the so-called Hoover Cap UFO when he was not high in South America. That was basically the George Adamski craft, which is a hoaxed craft. Mm-hmm. So here he is. And I think he and his brother saw it, if I'm not mistaken. Like there was another person that saw it with him. And so they're out there looking for psychedelics, right? But they're not high, but they're seeing something that only a high person would see. And it's a replica of a known hoaxed thing from a hoaxer. But there it is. And it's like, that ain't aliens. There's no, again, I go back to my old standby. There's no alien tax dollars going to that project of sending someone to Earth to do that to people in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
That doesn't happen. So we got to think deeper than the obvious go-to. And then we got to think about why that's the obvious go-to. I think that's part of it. It's not just think deeper about what else this could be, but think about why it is that we jump to aliens. I mean, I know that the entity will accommodate us on that.
Yeah.
But why is it that we do that? What is it about our thinking where we're thinking about the future, forward thinking? Because this is new. This is like post-industrial age thinking. We didn't always think this way. So is there something about the way that we think that is also being parodied?
Well, I mean, you had the airships, potentially. I mean, most of those were probably not real, but some of them likely were. And that was a little ahead of the time, unless you talk to, names tonight. Walter Bosley and the whole NIMSA thing, which, suggests that they had these type of things in the late 1800s. But, they were described, obviously, like Jacques Vallee said, fairies, various types of mythological creatures, demons, angels. So, I mean, they're not necessarily forward thinking, but they are within the zeitgeist of the time.
Yes. Well, those are. Not the cloud. I think the airships would probably be maybe the start of the forward thinking, where they're sort of like one step ahead of where we are, or two steps ahead of where we are. Whereas fairies are just sort of a perpetual, the invisible people. They live right there.
And I would think that's because our technological advancement in that time period, that's where it really started picking up. So we started looking more forwards.
But we also, so we came out of cyclical thinking and we started doing future forward thinking. And we start projecting this fake future that we say is something we should strive to be, and it's inevitable. Now it's inevitable.
Yeah.
So this way they can sell you AI or whatever it is. It's inevitable. Just go with it. It doesn't matter that we know it's going to destroy us. Just go with it. It's inevitable. Because we want to do it because it's new and we like new frontiers.
Yeah.
But I think it is calling attention to how we think, at least, or it's in tandem with how we think, not just what we think the beings are, but how our actual minds are processing time. And that may be, like I said, a parody. It may not. It may just be that it's in tandem with that. So it is switched over to invisible people and, living beside us and don't go into the fairy ring.
Right.
To something from the future that we're going to, do handshake deals with or whatever, and of course now that's switching to, maybe they're interdimensional aliens. But the interesting thing is I can think of no scenario where a human scientist or a human military gets into a spaceship and goes to another planet and meets those people, astronauts essentially meeting people from another planet, having all this paranormal effect and all of this, Dark Night of the Soul stuff happening and all of the effects. Because if you think about it happening to us, people are always like, well, we just don't know. It could be. But if you just think of it materially, like it's astronauts. When you say aliens coming here from another planet, you're talking about astronauts.
Right.
So how would astronauts be doing this sort of ballooning effect of paranormal stuff that permeates one's life just by landing? Just by offering pancakes out on a road somewhere.
Right. And that type of absurdity. Like, I think Jacques Vallee was probably the first one to point out how ridiculous some of the stuff they were doing was, how many people saw them taking plant samples or soil samples or things like this. It's like, how many of these do you need? And why would you ever do it where someone's going to see you?
Right. Yeah, and it's the same thing, that just gets upgraded to alien abductions.
Yeah.
How many tests do you need to do on a person? How many antiquated techniques do you need to make hybrids and babies and stuff that are like antiquated by our own technology and our own future forward thinking? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how much of this do you need to do? And so I think, again, it's calling attention to itself in myriad ways to like see beyond that. And when a skeptic or a debunker or whatever gets a hold of that notion, they use that to mean that it's all in your head, it's all psychological, it's all crap. But it's like no amount of intellectualizing that stops it. So is it? Because I function sanely in the world as far as I know, and I can articulate the stuff that's happening with me. I don't think I'm mentally ill, but I guess mentally ill people wouldn't think they're mentally ill. But I think you know where I'm going with this, right? Like it doesn't matter how much therapy I would have. Because I've had therapy, and it doesn't matter. It's still there. So, and the fact that the other thing that's new to us, along with our sense of time over the last 100 years or so, maybe longer, I guess, is this sense of materiality and this sense of reductionism to just material processes. So, for some reason, probably our own arrogance, for those of us who believe this stuff, we think that is the evolution of humanity. That's what we all need to be Spock, right?
Right.
We need to get rid of emotion and we need to be Spock and we need to see logically, as opposed to, you know what? That's actually mental illness. That's actually taking away aspects of the human being that need to be fully understood as opposed to repressed and done away with.
Well, and that's what you see with Vulcans in Star Trek, is that they seem to have some level of mental illness. They melt down. They, when the emotion comes out, they're out of control.
That's true. Yeah.
When I saw the giant UFO I saw over Cayuga Lake, which was one of the most liminal points in my life, a few days later, I'm driving somewhere else at night, and I look up, and I see a normal plane, fairly low, and I think, see, now that's what a normal plane looks like. Because I'm still, like, going back and forth in my mind, like, there's nothing else this could be. I don't know what this is. Like, this is a legit unknown, because it was immense and brighter than anything I've ever seen before. And I'm going, see, that's a normal plane. And as soon as I think that, the plane starts looking like the UFO I saw, but further away. And then it goes back to a normal plane. And I'm like, what the hell was that? Like, did I imagine that? What just happened?
Mm-hmm. Well, so when you had that sighting, did you become paranoid at any point and start looking around the sky for things?
No.
Okay, because I did. I think, like, back in high school, I would be looking for stuff like, am I being followed by UFOs? And it's like, everything starts to look like a UFO, satellites, planes,
gotcha.
Whatever, Venus. And this is where the skeptic comes in to tell me that.
Right.
And I think that's, again, another sort of, both are true at the same time. Like, I had an outrageous UFO experience with what looked like a craft with windows and brightly lit and all that. And as a result of that, I become sort of paranoid and looking up all the time and reading literature telling me what I am, right? Telling me, oh, you're probably an abductee and, oh, this is probably happening. So you get inundated with this information, false or real, doesn't matter, but making you paranoid. And soon you are looking for all kinds of other things. But again, you got to remember, like, oh, there is the truth. You may go outlandish and you may get delusional, but there is the truth that you had this outlandish experience.
Right.
So both are true at the same time. And I think I'm probably saying this because another thing that came up with that same friend, mystery friend who was saying, I believe you, but I don't know why, was the question of, can the paranormal drive you mad? And I think yes. I think we're mad, and I think we can be driven just naturally, and I think we can be driven madder by not dealing with it appropriately. And I see this, like, there's a guy, I don't even want to say his name because I don't want to offend anybody here, but there is somebody who everyone thinks is an experiencer. I've never been impressed with him, but okay. But recently, let's just say, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm wrong. I don't know anything about him. But recently he's like put out footage that is somebody has clearly identified as a train going through the woods at night. But he's got this whole elaborate, I called them in story. And he seems to do this. He's got these light videos that, and I do think that there's something about, like, if you have this experience, you can either become addicted to the attention that you get for having experience, or you can be frustrated when the experience stops or goes into a lull, and so you start faking it. You know what I mean? I think there's a whole lot of nuance here that is unfortunate because it just muddies the water of, like, what's a real experiencer and what's not, and what's a real experience, what isn't.
And
it's a lot.
You see that with poltergeist cases too, especially when it's kids involved, that, it seems to be this unconscious release of PK energy. But when they start getting the attention from it, the poltergeist activity stops because it's lowering their stress levels, they're getting attention, et cetera, et cetera. So then they start faking it. And people are like, oh, look, see, they were faking it the whole time.
Huh.
And
that's interesting. So then I wonder if the Ouija board stuff then was like, I mean, can it work the other way where nothing's happening? It is just, it starts off the unconscious impulse on the Ouija board, right?
Yeah.
It starts moving around, and then you all get in sync, and then you're a bunch of kids with all that kid energy. And if you start believing it, does it co-create a narrative and become real in some way?
That's kind of what I was thinking when you were talking about it all. I mean, look at the Philip experiment. I mean, they literally created a ghost. It's not anyone who ever existed, but people were picking up that information from what they created.
I don't know that. What's the Philip experiment?
Oh, you need to look into the Philip experiment. It was a scientific experiment done to see if they could create a ghost. And they did it in a laboratory, and they got all kinds of poltergeist activity. People who knew nothing about the fact that this was not a real entity would get the information that they created for this thing's backstory from this being.
Huh.
So it was entirely created just by them, basically willing it into existence and then having people come in and do seances and stuff. And they got legitimate effects from it.
So When was this done?
Oh, I want to say the late 80s.
See, this reminds me of another reason that I'm peed off at Jacques Vallee is I don't know if you remember, like in the Paratopia episode where we interviewed him and he was talking about being able to, like, if you triangulate any area, you're going to be able to create a UFO hotspot.
Right.
So you should be wary of UFO hotspots, and that he had been experimenting in trying to create one himself and had some success. And he was talking about that. It didn't dawn on me to ask then, but I would ask now, why the hell are you involved with the Skinwalker Ranch, which is clearly a bunch of crap?
Yeah.
And even if it's not a bunch of crap, if you can just triangulate any area, then it's not actually a hotspot, is it? Everywhere is a hotspot. Right. So there is something here about, like, it's got to be about something else. It can't really be about the research.
Yeah, the Skinwalker Ranch stuff. I mean, when I first read the book, I was pretty fascinated. It had
me too,
because it had such a wide range of high strangeness going on and everything. But now I think even if any of that stuff was legitimate, there's no way to tell what's what anymore. Like so many of these big named cases, the water's so muddy that it's like, if there is valuable stuff in there, how do you tell the difference?
Well, also, like, I guess it's great now that we have the ability to see these people on TV, because It's one thing to read a book and have your imagination explode with it. But then when you see them on TV and they're like, I'm the guy in charge of the Skinwalker Ranch, huh? You're like, oh no, wait a minute, what?
But those aren't the same people, I don't think.
We're going to dig in the ground. Oh no, we just hit irradiated dirt from atomic weaponry. Oh no, wait, what? You guys are all hallucinating and getting cancer from freaking irradiated dirt. What are you talking about? This is case closed to me. Get out of there, man. This is a hazard.
Well, that whole area...
I mean, it really is. Like, the History Channel show, it really is just like a bunch of dummies who are sitting around going, oh, God, I hope, what's his name? Who's in charge of that? The realtor mogul?
It's not Bigelow anymore, is it?
Yeah, Bigelow. Well, at the time it was. Yeah, I sure hope Bigelow doesn't catch wind of this, because he's going to see that we're just sitting around all day doing nothing. You know, like that's the show, is we sit around doing nothing. And then we've got this skeptic who comes in and says, hey, let's do something. And then they do something that amounts to more nothing. You might as well have just sat around doing nothing. But then you read the George Knapp book and it's like, look at all these amazing things people claim to see, but are not recorded anywhere at all.
Well, I think some of them were recorded.
What do I believe? My lying eyes or George Knapp? Which do I believe?
You know, at the time, I didn't have a problem believing George Knapp.
Me neither.
But the thing is, I think they did record some of that stuff and it was just never released. And why was it never released?
Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, that's...
Yes. Good question, sir.
It's like the question concerning 9/11. And I don't want to get into conspiracies or anything right now, but you have no footage from the plane that hit the Pentagon, but they collected all that footage. So why have we never seen it?
You do have that gas station footage.
Yeah, which is like 3 frames or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, they went around and they collected all the footage from all that, because at the time it was one of the most heavily surveilled areas in the country. Probably still is. So there was plenty of footage, but we never saw any of it, never officially.
Right.
And why? You know, like, are you trying to stoke a conspiracy or are you hiding something?
What's the footage that you're looking for? That they had from the plane or from where?
No, from there were a lot of cameras around the buildings that they confiscated of the plane coming in and hitting the building, you know? And so, like, again, I mean, it could very well just be like, well, if we don't release this will stoke conspiracy theories. Like, you always have to kind of like take that extra step with conspiracies.
Well, it could also be, I could also see, now look, I'm fine with certain amount of conspiracy theorizing about 9/11.
Oh, so am I.
But when it comes to this, I can actually think, like, you know, they probably want to classify, even though we have all seen it with our own eyes, or what we knew that this attack was happening, but something slamming into the Pentagon, they probably don't want that footage out there that makes them look weak.
That could be too.
You know what I mean? That could maybe give away a detail of something caught in the explosion process that's inside the building. You know, all that stupid paranoia stuff that they make top secret for no reason.
That's a possibility. I mean, it could be a bunch of these different things mixed together too. Yeah. But anyway, I don't want to get into that. I wanted to get back into real quick while we have a minute or so here left. Actually, let's talk about where people can hear all this stuff and get your books, and then we'll do a patron, and we'll continue with a couple of things.
All right. I don't know. Go to the best way is ourundoing.com. I've got a bookstore in there now, and
good.
you can click through to Paratopia stuff as well.
Okay. And the Project Core stuff is there as well?
Project Core is there. Our Undoing Radio. Everything on there is there. Yeah.
And how many books do you have?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think.
Okay. Are a couple of them fiction?
8? 2 of them are fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you working on
Well, 3 of them, because there's a children's book.
Oh.
So there's that.
Okay.
So yeah, 3 fiction, and then, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4 nonfiction.
Okay. Are you working on anything new?
I am working on a book about Kundalini that will be written in a style unlike anything I have written and unlike anything that has been written about Kundalini, for better or for worse. So how about that?
I am excited to read that. All right. Well, thanks for joining me for this. I'll peg you with a few more questions in the Patreon.
Okay. Thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.
All right, I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons for their support. Without you, this show would not be possible. And I want to give a shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Greg Ross, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Martha, Midnight Review Presents, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Illuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Corey Nelson, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, J. Otto Bullitt, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda, Linz Jackson K., MJ Armstrong, Mark Brady, Sasha McHale, No One, Mark Shoemaker, Jonathan Frost, Ole Andre Olar, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sarah Horgan, Stacy Sherwood, Stevie Norman, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic podcast, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, The Esoteric Book Club podcast, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Varosh K., Victoria, Vincent Trewell, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Matthew Brown, Colin Karras, and Craig Sagastumi. Thank you all so very much for the support. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Jeremy and I continue on a Patreon segment about this and many other subjects. So if you're not a patron, go become one at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Just click on the big Patreon link, and that will take you over to the Patreon page where it's only $3 a month to become a patron, support the show, help us out, and help keep all this going. I want to welcome a bunch of new patrons. I want to welcome back Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Rob. A thank you to Jonathan Frost for upping his membership. Chris H., Simone Elisa, or Eliza. Sorry if I mispronounced that one. I'm not sure how that is pronounced. Sparrowhawk, Catherine McCormick, Jason, Christian, Deltron Zero, Dave Baxter, and Mark Shoemaker. Thank you all for joining up, and I hope you enjoy the extra content. You can also see the documentary Chris Ernst did on Where Did the Road Go and myself free as a patron. So again, it's only $3 a month, and it makes a big difference toward me continuing this show and hopefully expanding this show as we go. Also, again, Alba Twitch, October 5th. I will be there unless something bad happens. And so probably will be Christopher Ernst, as well as obviously Timothy Renner and Octavian and Chad and whoever else ends up stopping by. So it's in Columbia, Pennsylvania. Look it up. It's albatwitch.com, I believe. albatwitchday.com. Yeah, albatwitchday.com. Saturday, October 5th. 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can go check the website and see what kind of stuff is going on. They'll have speakers and vendors and all kinds of stuff. It's always a good time. And in November, I will also be speaking at the Strange Realities Conference, as I have, I think, every year since Adam started it. And that will be on November 1st and 2nd. And there's the online version of it, or you can go there in person down in Nashville, Tennessee. I will not be that one in person. That one I'm just doing an online presentation. And you can go to strangerealitiesconference.com for more info on that. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.